So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to Winter in CAIR Andros. Now, you may notice from the frames and the amount of armies that are on the field today that this is going to be a long one, and I'm actually surprised that this one loaded in at all, if I'm honest, but nonetheless, I'll go through the army compositions, but I will be going through them relatively quickly because a lot of these the defending armies are all bunched together quite substantially, and the attacking armies, I imagine, are going to be sort of more standard fare. Because all of the defending armies are playing as the neutrals or the rebels, which means we will be seeing individual units which we don't get to see an awful lot of, such as the Ents, which are very similar to trolls in the way that they function, only they are substantially tougher. And then if we have a look, we can also see that there are several units that are in regular factions as well. The Greenway Guards actually aren't anymore, but stuff like the Warriors of Khazad-dûm and the Morroquendi Bows also can be found, of course, in the standard armies of Dale and Khazad-dûm, and there's obviously a few Elven units as well. There's more Ents, and that's going to be pretty much it for here, so you can imagine you don't get to see the rebels an awful lot, and that's because there are individual units, which it's essentially where like bits and pieces of units go to sort of gather. There's no real rhyme or reason to them, but here we'll be seeing a good amount of variety from them. Obviously Morroquendi Pikes, Dunman Pikemen, all can be found in the standard armies as well. More Greenway Guards, we can also see more Dunman Pikes, fair amount of Greenway Guards actually, more Morroquendi Bows. And that's pretty much going to be it. There's actually some Variag mercenaries from Rune as well, so a real smorgasbord here of different things. Thieves of Tharbad, another Cardlin unit there, the Morroquendi Bows again, Black Wolves from Rudour. And we can see over here more Morroquendi Bows. There's an incredible amount of Elven units on display here. It'll be interesting to see how that works out. Obviously Megil E. Erin as well. 5 versus 3 means it doesn't really matter how overpowered these units can seem. They should still be overwhelmed in the long run from the 5 attacking armies that are arrayed against them. Some sentries of Khazad-dûm. Over here we can see, of course, the powerful skin changers, which again, they are unique to the rebels, or neutrals as they're now called, Rudour clansmen, and that's pretty much going to be it. So, kind of a smaller army in many ways, but obviously individual units of substantial power. And then over here we can see the first attacking army is going to be Son of the Dunedain, who's playing as Linden. Again, I'm just going to sort of skim over this really, so he's got some Harlinden infantry. Obviously he's got some pikes, some hybrid cavalry as well, and then he's got some high tier units as well, like the Noldorin Guard, and I imagine he's probably got some Noldorin Blade Masters hidden amongst this somewhere. Possibly not actually, which would be interesting. But Linden's units are going to be very useful for going toe-to-toe with some of the rebels, or neutrals as I should say, some of their better units. Now we shall go into the Winter Forest over here, and we shall see Longhorn, who is playing as Rohan. Now Rohan has brought a lot of their infantry, which they're maybe not best known for. However, their numbers will certainly stand them in good stead, so in many ways they will form pretty good cannon fodder. And obviously with the AP that the Rudour Axemen give them, Rohan have got some decent units which give AP, as well as the Westmark, they have the Westmark Marshal, so a lot of two-handed axes here, a lot of AP which can come in handy against some of what the rebels have. Westmark infantry is of course the best mainline Rohan infantry unit that they have available to them. Spears, of course, basically the spearman equivalent. He also has the knights, which they could be incredibly useful. The skin changers will maul them in melee, I would imagine, based on their higher HP values. But if they can avoid them, the charges from knights could prove to be very useful in advancing through the settlement, as will of course the hand-thrown projectiles of the Shield Maidens, the Meduseld Guard, and then the Hornberg Sentries are a quality infantry unit indeed. Down here we can see Rune, played by Tundra's Fox. His army is much more spread out, so he's got several units of Eastron warriors. I imagine he's going to be the primary cannon fodder on this side of the river. He's got a lot of lower tier units which he can use as such. The Dragon's Wrath crossbows are a nice unique unit that Rune have, and again they can be potentially devastating against the high priority targets that the neutrals have. And obviously the Carmel's Chosen also represent a quality unit as well. Moving across to the other side, where there are only 2 armies, we have New Danko, who is going to be playing as Gondor, and again it's pretty much going to be as you would imagine. There's some Fountain Guard, Guards of Osgiliath, a lot of pole arms that Gondor bring to the field, very good ones as well. Gondor archers, their archers are pretty good in a skirmish fight, but there's a lot of Morroquendi bows in CAIR Andros, Nimlothian Honour Guard as well, and then we can see some Citadel Guard, so a lot of quality units here. A smaller Gondorian army maybe than they could have brought, but they've definitely dumped all their money into some quality, which is not perhaps the worst thing to do considering the amount of quality the defenders have tied up in their individual units. And then finally another runic army, Saucy Pants here, is going to be fielding a very similar army to the other side. A lot of Eastron clansmen, a lot of Eastron warriors. He has some Carmel's Dragon Knights instead of the Carmel's Chosen, however. So that's another unit of knights which could potentially cause havoc amongst the defences on the interior of the city. And then back here there's a few more units which they've got waiting in reserve. Some Balchoth Tribesmen, some Eastron crossbows, so some hidden units back here. Well, they're not hidden, but they are unreachable for all intents and purposes for the defenders. Now I will make a little cut here because I think that the deployment zones are no longer active, but I imagine there's going to be a lengthy manoeuvring process before the attack on the city itself actually starts. So I will rejoin when the battle begins. So, as we see the first volleys of the defending archers start to let loose, and I do apologise, the frame rate will probably drop in places, and I have had to turn down the quality a little bit to make a battle of such a scale actually work and function. Hopefully we don't crash in the later stages, that would be a real tragedy. But as we can see, obviously in CAIR Andros, the larger version of CAIR Andros, indeed we can see that the first engagements have begun between the Greenway Guards and the first wave of the Runic Infantry, which does have the first level of armour upgrade. CAIR Andros' lower city has got 4 avenues of attack that the attackers can take, the 2 bridges on both sides and the 2 fords on both sides. Now, the defenders have set out their stall to be reasonably aggressive. They're not going to fall back to the keep too early, and perhaps that's obvious from how long this battle is going to take. But this is also quite dangerous from a defending point of view, because if just one of these front lines starts to fall, their entire defence could collapse if they aren't prepared to deal with that. Now, the thing they do have going for them is their standard infantry is made up of some pikes and some spears from the human contingent of the neutral faction, but also they do have the Megil the Erin and the upgraded warriors of Khazad-dûm, which in terms of standard infantry are going to be able to defeat most others that come up against them, especially stuff like Eastron clansmen. They're going to have no trouble whatsoever dealing with them. The issue I think for the defenders is going to come when the more quality units from the attackers rear their ugly heads, particularly from the likes of Gondor and Linden. Some of those units they've got are very nasty, and the defenders have got very little which can go one-to-one with them. They do have some very high damage units like the Blackwolds, but I think another thing which the defenders have working against them is that Linden are going to be the last ones in. In an ideal world, the defenders would want the arrows to do a lot of the work against Linden's more lightly armoured contingent, but as it is, Linden have got the ideal situation for themselves here. They just need to wait until a lot of the ammunition has been used up, and then they can strike. You can see here the Dunman pikemen taking a little bit of arrow fire from somewhere. Ah, I see. Eastron Hunters getting in position, shooting right along the line, that's nice. It is worth saying as well that the 3 armies for the defenders, commanded by Thick Dick, Master Blaster is also around here somewhere, and Proxima Centauri, which is a name I've not seen before, so that's good. But interestingly enough, the defenders just trying to skirmish, the attackers I should say, just trying to skirmish down the defenders, which is certainly the right thing to do in this situation. You need to make the most of what resources you have available, although they aren't going to win this skirmish fight. The Eastron Hunters, they are numerous, but they are not the most quality archers, and the Variag mercenaries, of course, with their shields, should be able to do some decent damage to the pikemen, however, which is going to be one of the primary anchors for the initial defence. And if they can get rid of the pikes in places, then some of this lower tier infantry from Rune might be able to make some headway. Nice to see the Greenway Guards. They are an AP spear in a similar vein to the Goblin Heavy Spears, provided they haven't been changed. I can't imagine they have if they got dumped in the Rebels faction. You can see over here as well some more arrows coming forth. Again, the frame rate dropping a little bit every time I move the camera. Hopefully that will change as the battle goes on. The Morroquendi bows are firing, but well, they're not really landing on their marks. They're hitting the arrow tower mainly, not really finding their mark. And even if they were, the Ramasekor garrison are definitely not a target that's worth going after. So yeah, a bit of a waste here. Although they do have a lot of Morroquendi bows in reserve, the defenders, as well as a lot of Morroquendi pikes, and these elven units are definitely going to be the basis of their defence if they're going to win this battle. Certainly won't be the human ones. You can see some siege towers beginning to make their way towards the fjords. But it looks as though both the attackers are very content to just skirmish with the defenders, and the defenders really have no option but really just to sit here and hold their positions. If they attack outwards, the attackers will be able to use a lot of their numbers to try and collapse in on the defenders as they move forwards. Individual units of pikemen, again clansmen. A lot of the runic armies are made up of these lower tier units, which the defenders won't be too scared of. It's, as I said, it's really going to be the Gondorian and the Linden army, I think, particularly the Gondorians, they bought a lot of quality units. And the best thing for them is their meat shields are performing their role very adequately thus far. Here come the Ents though. Master Blaster sending forward his Ents, which they can cause some real havoc in the enemy's lines if they've only brought forward lower quality units, because Clansmen and the like are not really going to be able to touch the Ents. The Ents are just bowling through their allied forces in a similar vein to Trolls. There was a plan once upon a time to make the Ents a unit that you could pick when you played as the Woodland Realms, but that would probably push them a little bit far over the edge in terms of their power capabilities. But it does look as though the Ents are going to come down here to try and attack this section, which is going to be an interesting move, because Rune don't really have much over here that can survive the Ents, and I think Tundra's Fox realises that, because he's retreating en masse now. Although Rohan, I should say, have their Sons of Yore in the background over there. I think one of these Eastron warriors is going to get caught. This is going to be fairly brutal. It wasn't the best charge, this. Sometimes you've got to take manual control and just path your units into them and let them do the damage. At this point you may as well just try and trap this unit of Eastron warriors. The Ents are going to retreat though. That's a wasted bit of wasted potential there. Those Eastron warriors could have been destroyed relatively easily. More of the enemy's numbers whittled down, which is the key when you're playing as the defenders. This is a very strange form of attack so far. The Palagir Marines, the attackers, are very eager to utilise their skirmish power where they can to try and break down the plentiful pikes that the defenders have on offer. But I think at this rate I actually might make a little cut. The way the attackers have approached this so far is very frustrating from a commentating point of view, because there's not really been much to say. So yes, I think I will, until the attackers grab a hold of their balls and charge into the melee. So I didn't have to wait too long, fortunately. These Palagir Marines presumably ran out of ammunition and charged in. Now this is a little bit of a waste on the Gondorian players' part, because there's no way they're going to be able to force their way through here with a unit of out-of-ammunition javelins. The pikes and the spears are going to hold relatively steadfast. Interestingly enough as well, it's a bit of a misstep over on this side, I think, from the Linden player. This was almost certainly a misclick. These 4 Linden pikemen charged forth all on their lonesome, and of course a very juicy target indeed for the Beriag mercenaries. Linden are not particularly durable at the best of times to ranged fire, and the pikes of course even less so with their complete lack of a shield. Very low arm values as well, but Tundra's Fox's men retreating very much into the middle of the river over there. But fortunately, however, we do have this attack coming as well from Gondor en masse with the support of a lot of these runic lower tier units from Saucy Pants. We are going to see another attack on this side, and this is the moment I would imagine the attackers are going to collapse in from all angles to try and deal some real damage to these defensive lines. It's weaker in places than it is in others. Wherever the Dunman pikemen are shoring up the line, there's some potential to break through there. Their stats are of course very low, and of course if you can start shooting them with your arrows, you're also going to do a lot of damage indeed. Ramus Ekor garrison archers presumably going to get into position to try and shoot point blank into the front of the pike formation. And they're a good choice, because even when with the Beriag mercenaries shooting at them, they can stand their ground in a skirmish fight. They don't have very high damage at all, but very good, very cost effective at range. Rohan is now going to be backing up Tundra's Foxes. Very difficult to say in that sense, but he is going to be charging across here with Rohan support this time, so maybe a bit more of a comprehensive assault this time. There's also Citadel Guard over here, which is presumably pretty worrying from a defensive point of view, because they really don't have anything in the immediate vicinity which is going to be capable of going toe-to-toe with a unit of the Citadel Guard's quality. And when they're backed up by a whole bunch of Eastron clansmen, it's going to be pretty tough on the defenders. Meanwhile, this is going to be very slow, because the units are only engaging each other basically 3-on-3 or 2-on-2. And that's going to be... it's going to take a long time for this fight to go anywhere. And in fact, this is good for the defenders. This siege tower is blocking the way so that the attackers can only go in through a very narrow area. That's really going to help them in terms of their pikes. The defenders need to be ready to use all of these reserves that they've got. They've definitely set out their army into the force that's going to defend the keep and the force that is going to defend the town. Slowly and surely we can see Linden are coming forward as well, which is kind of bold, I would say, from Son of the Dunedain, because you know these Fall in the Pikes could be incredibly useful in the late game, but they're not going to survive to see the late game if they charge into battle when the defenders still have a lot of archer ammunition. And it's worth saying as well that the Morroquendi bows, there's still a lot of them that still have their ammunition remaining. Thus far it's only really been this one unit of Variag mercenaries that's done the vast majority of the skirmish damage to the attackers. You can see over here there's a lot of angles at which the attackers can sort of position their assault. A lot of roads that they can go down, which the defenders have to cover them all, and as soon as one starts to fall, the defenders need to start thinking of either seriously reinforcing it or pulling back. Again, this other unit of Fall in the Pikemen's taken some severe losses as well. Once again, Rune are sort of taking up the position they held before the Ents drove them away. Only this time they have the support of some Rohan infantry and individual Linden pikemen. It's been a very odd battle thus far. The attackers have been a little bit too overcautious for my liking. The rebels do have some nice super high tier units, but honestly a lot of these initial defences are made up of units which you really shouldn't be that scared of. Dunman pikemen, Greenway guards, you know, not exactly the last word in terms of quality, especially not with the sort of army that Gondor's brought to the field. Citadel Guard are going to have absolutely no issue pushing through Dunman pikemen at all. And backed up by all of these runic cannon fodder units, you're going to have no problem overwhelming the outer defence if you're quick and decisive. Especially seeing as the defenders aren't too eager to utilise all of their skirmish power. They haven't really flexed their muscles too much yet, which could work against them in the long run. It's all well and good saving your ammunition, but you have to use it at some point in the battle. The Morroquendi bows are getting into position now. But once again, the Eastron Hunters getting into position, trying to shoot into the enemies. They're going for the Black Walls as well, which is a good choice, multiple HP. A Berserker style unit, very low melee defense, and next to no armour, but their hit points give them survivability. It's a similar philosophy to what the Wargs use on horseback. But these Eastron Hunters have already taken some fairly substantial losses. Rohan have also committed forward shielded units first of all, which is very wise. They'll be a little bit more durable, provided they're facing the enemy at any rate, than the Axemen, which a lot of Rohan's army is made up of thus far. Meanwhile, an attack on this side as well. We can see that the Dunman pikemen so far are going to be keeping the Eastron clansmen at bay. I think the Eastron clansmen are going to try and push through, but these Greenway guards, and also there's Rudar clansmen giving this army giving this part of the line a bit more rigidity, although they did push in the one area where the spearmen weren't covering initially, but with the support of the Greenway guards I think they should probably be alright. These strong clansmen aren't going to have the staying power to make this sort of push stick. If it had been a more survivable unit it might well have done. What's going on up there? Eastron warriors. There's also Carmel's shadow bows from Rune, so the body piercing going to be ripping through the Greenway guards. Some potential reinforcements there as well. Meanwhile, over on this side, still not much going on in terms of melee on the other fronts, though now we might be seeing a dual pike to pike. The guards of Osgiliath, of course, far higher quality than the standard Dunman pikemen. But the Gondorian pikes are in a fairly vulnerable position if the Variag mercenaries and the Morroquendi bows decide to target them. Although, looks as though now we're going to see the first engagement over on this side. The Rohan spearmen, I keep calling them runic, going to be charging into this front line made up of the Rudar pikes and spearmen. The Rohan spears are going to be... they're going to be able to out-damage the Rudar spears here. The Rudar clansmen have got very low attack values. However, the pikes might make the difference here, although Rohan, I think they're just going to try and push through. And this is the issue I think that the defenders have, is they've set up all of these pike lines, but they need to be prepared to reinforce them rapidly, because you can see here already the defenders, or the attackers I should say, smell blood. The spears have already pushed into the formation and now they're going to be backed up by these Eastron clansmen. And the defensive line is going to need support. They're not going to be able to hold these guys at bay for too much longer. The Rohan spearmen doing a very good job there. More runic low tier units are going to be engaging this line as well, although honestly once again it looks as though the siege towers are partially doing the defenders' job for them by making it a little bit more difficult to engage the line as comprehensively as they would like. Let's see what's going on over here. The Variag mercenaries have been committed to melee, which is going to shore up this line enough to the point where this one is probably going to hold. The Rudar, well, there's Eastron warriors and clansmen in here now, but I don't think they have enough pushing power. They've got some Four Linden pikes, but they already took damage from the archers. I think this line is going to be just fine for the defenders for the time being. But all of these resources are tied up all the while. And this front line here was just pushed right through by the Rohan spears. And a rather hastily assembled secondary line of Thandrim Erin and Greenway Guards is now being sent forward to try and hold the line, but it might already be too late. And as I said, as soon as one road falls, you need to start thinking about pulling back to a secondary defensive position. Maybe trying to hold up these streets over here and that street there. Because those Rohan spearmen were used very well there by Longhorn. He pushed right through the pike line. I feel as though the defenders felt that just one unit of Rudauer spearmen would have been enough to give them the mass they needed, but the attackers descended on them with sufficient numbers. There is a lot of resources being committed over here now, though. Blackwolds and Warriors of Khazad-dûm. So there are some pretty serious units coming in, but this line might already be a lost cause. That's a lot of Clansmen and Westmark spearmen you've got to hack your way through. Although the spearmen are wavering, they took a lot of casualties pushing through the line in the manner which they did. But if Tundra's Fox continues to reinforce this push, I think it could go very well for the attackers. Meanwhile, the mouse controls tend to be so much worse when it's a large-scale battle like this because of the lag, but now we can see this front line is holding up relatively well because it's a little bit more difficult for the attackers to get into a position where they can push here with their mass, because their own siege towers are getting in the way of their army being more coordinated, which means the pikes are able to engage in a little bit more of an advantageous fashion for the defenders, especially seeing as their Morroquendi pikes holding up this line as well. Elven pikemen, of course, very, very strong. Morroquendi bows firing in. All of these Elven archers, as well as the Variag mercenaries, dishing out a lot of damage to the attackers. So now the defenders are being forced to utilise a lot of their ranged power, which of course means they won't be able to save quite so much for the late game as perhaps they were hoping. Those Eastron warriors taking a real pummeling, and they don't have shields, of course, so a good target there. And also with a unit like the Blackwolds and the Warriors of Khazad-dûm, the synergy between those two is probably going to be enough, and now you can see that the units are starting to rout. So the Rohan spears did a good job initially, but I feel as though the attackers needed to keep pushing in order to make that stick, and unfortunately for them now, the runic lower tiers are starting to lose heart. Again, a unit that can inspire in that sort of situation is invaluable because it can keep your men in the fight. What's going on in the bridge over here? This was a fight that the defenders were doing very well in, and indeed that is still the case. These Four Linden pikemen are fighting, and they haven't really taken anything in terms of casualties, although the Carmel's Chosen are right there as well. More and more runic lower tiers are coming in, so the Easterlings are certainly taking the brunt of the offensive casualties thus far, but this line is going to hold. It's a very thick front line. A combination of pikes, spears and disposable skirmishers, we shall say. What's going on the other bridge, however? It was definitely a very difficult engagement, and indeed the attackers have peeled off this one. I think they figured that they weren't going to punch through there without a little bit more in terms of investment. The Citadel Guard are on the front line though. And now you can see a unit of Morroquendi bows that are out of ammunition, shoring up the line, plugging a potential hole that was forming. More and more arrows just being let loose into the attackers as they move forward, and I did notice as well that Rohan has sent forward their Riddermark Axemen. They have their shields on their back, which means it's not their shield value is not as high as standard melee infantry. Don't want this game to crash. That would be heartbreaking. Oof. Now that's an interesting move. What archer was that? Oh, it's crossbows. So the crossbow is getting nice enfilading fire along this line. And that could be important because this is where the Blackwolds are, and the Blackwolds make up a lot of the damage dealing potential of the defensive line over here. And once again, another big push by the Rohan infantry, the Riddermark Axemen forming the bulk of this second attack, and their AP is going to be very useful, particularly against the Dwarven contingent of this front line. Less so against the Elven and Rudauer men here. It's a lot of Riddermark Axemen, however, and they have substantially more bite than the Westmark spearmen that came before them. More Morroquendi bows that are out of ammunition, and another unit of Thandrim Erin. Skillful Elven spears, and over here, yeah, the Guards of Osgiliath proving far too much for the Dunman pikemen. You can see here once again the defensive line attempting to be shored up. Elven reinforcements have arrived. Looks like some arrows are being sent in here as well, which is what they should have been doing from the start, to be honest with you. The Guards of Osgiliath represent a pretty substantial threat to a front line like this, when your pikes are of lesser quality. Certainly this is where the majority of the action is here, though, this crossroads. All of these Rohan shields. There's a lot of dead Rohan units over here, though. The initial push was good, but in order to make all this bloodshed worth it, they really need to crack this defence. And if they are able to push through here, of course, it will allow them to recharge this defensive line, and then the floodgates will well and truly open. Because though there's nope, there isn't an engagement over here. Dunman, Pikemen and Rudar clansmen just waiting for those Eastron clansmen to move into position. The defenders are very determined, however, to hold the outer portions of the city, which is good to see. The temptation is always to fall back to the most extensive fortifications at the back of CAIR Andros rather than trying to hold the city. Still, these lower tier runic units have really not had the best of luck over here. In this situation, the Rudar pikes were supported to the extent that they needed to be by the spearmen, giving them the mass they needed, and the defence over here is held very firm. These Forlinden pikemen, however, are doing quite well on this section, and indeed, if this keeps up, there could be a little gap that appears. There is a unit of Thandrum Yeren ready to reinforce, but eventually you'd have to imagine the attackers get through here, and that's somewhat of a concern for the defenders as well. The Sons of Yorl, as soon as the smallest gap appears in this defensive line, the knights could burst through, and that could be a real problem. There's a lot of units on display, though. A lot of these lower tier runic units, though, are routing. There isn't any inspiration units nearby them. These Riddermark Axemen are not. I am a little bit surprised that there isn't any units of quality that are being committed over here. I could have made the difference, honestly. Make life much more difficult for the defenders to hold against a torrent of lower tier units. Over here, the Carmel's Chosen are attacking in an area that they don't really need their inspiration bonus to be active. The Forlinden pikemen are very unlikely to rout in this situation anyway. Wardens of Alos Tyrion, I don't think they've utilised their ammunition just yet. Not sure what they would want to be doing in melee. As far as rangers go, they are very good in melee. They've got their dual wield swords, they're very skillful. There's nothing here that would really cause them too much fear, other than maybe the pikes if they got caught up on them for too long. They don't have the highest armour, so the pikes would be free to dish out some damage to them. Yeah, this line over here is starting to look very ragged. It's only a matter of time before these Rohirrim foot soldiers bust through this front line. The Blackwolds are a very good high damage unit, but they don't have the most staying power in melee. Very similar to the Uruk-hai Berserkers. Good for burst damage, but as soon as their hit points have been expended, they are put to the sword pretty quickly. And you can see now some routing is starting to happen. Greenway Guards abandoning the front line. That front line has fallen, which is going to put this front line in severe jeopardy as well. They need to do something about this onrush of attackers now. Do they have anything on station which can help? No, they don't. These Ents have been committed forward, going into the Citadel Guard. I'm surprised the Ents were committed, to be fair, because at this point it's time to fall back. The defenders need to try and salvage what they can. And what the attackers need to do is commit forward their knights, both their Carmel's Dragon Knights and their Sons of Yorl if they can, any cavalry units they have, to pick off these defenders as they retreat. If they do so, then this battle could take a turn for the worst, although you can see here that the defenders are not going to fall all the way back to the keep. They are going to hold the inner city, so it's only the first line of defence that the attackers are broken through. There is still all of these lower tier runic units, however, so they haven't run out of cannon fodder yet. These Ents are still on the front line as well. They need to get out of there if they can. This front line is also going to fall now. A rear charge from the Riddermark Axemen. I have to say, the Rohirrim infantry so far have done very well for themselves. More Elven pikemen moving forward, sealing the doom of these units over here, really. All they can do is fight and get as many kills as they possibly can. And over here. This is going to be a last stand, primarily from the Morroquendi units, which haven't routed yet. The vast majority of the Rudauer and Cardlin units that were over here have already long gone. Morroquendi units now routing as well. It takes a lot to make Elven units route. Although, to be fair, I think the Morroquendi units actually suffer from the same slight morale debuff that mercenaries do. I might be wrong about that, but the base morale of elves is high anyway. Still some Carmel's shadow bows, and that's going to be just about that. The outer defences have fallen, and if we have a look at the percentages, the defenders have lost more so far. Again, I think perhaps the overall lack of quality might hurt the defenders. The neutrals, of course, do have those very strong individual units. The Ents and the Skin Changers are very strong. But I don't know if the main spine of their army has what it takes to really hold back the tide here. Both Runic armies have presumably taken a bit of a hit, but you know, look at all that. There's still Linden units here, Harland and infantry. Rohan still have their hand-thrown projectiles units left. It's going to be rough here, I think. The defenders have got an uphill struggle to come. As the attackers march on in. Surely there's not still units that are fighting to the death over here. I think that's just about it. They have been defeated. So, the Gondorians have moved in, and these lines have been formed up. And they have got all their ducks in a row, so they have taken into account every avenue of attack, although I know that there are some streets which are more difficult to use on this. Like, I'm not entirely sure that this is a pathway you can take in CAIR Andros. We shall see. Still going to be a struggle for the defenders to get through these front lines, because of course there are these Morroquendi pikes. I think it will come down largely to whether or not the attackers have got sufficient skirmishers to deal with the situation. They've of course got those Rohirrim axe throwers, but if they've got archers, the smart thing to do would definitely be to try and skirmish down and peel off some of these Morroquendi pikes. So the Eastron warriors are starting to move in. We're not even halfway through this fight yet. It's a very long one. Eastron warriors, both of the runic players are definitely the punching bags here. Large amounts of their army were made up of lower tier units, and they were the ones being pushed forward. They do have some individual units of quality, but I think the Gondorian and the Linden player have got the highest amount of quality, so they're probably going to try and hang back for the final assault to try and secure victory. A little bit of a force moving over here. Carmel's Chosen. This road over here. The Carmel's Chosen alone wouldn't be enough to get through that, especially not with some range support. I think I will make a little cut here until the assault actually begins, because it's probably going to be a lengthy manoeuvring process for the attacking armies to get themselves sorted out. A counter-attack. Master Blaster sees a moment of weakness. Tundra's Fox push forward these Eastron warriors and Eastron clansmen forward without any immediate support, and now these Megil e Erin are going to put them to the sword, and they will. Eastron warriors will put up a little bit more of a fight than other lower tier units, but ultimately I think it's going to be the morale which is going to let these runic units down. These elven units are going to quickly deal heavy damage, although it might end up being a little bit more of a mistake than anything else if these Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen have got anything to do with it. If they're going to throw their Nafatoons, their chanting. I'm not entirely sure what the Megil e Erin are doing. I think they realise it was probably a bit of a mistake. I mean, it would probably be more worth it to try and pull back at this point. At this point, this is reckless to the point of foolish. Even if you were able to engage the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen fully, in melee they are one of the most skillful units in the game. The Megil e Erin wouldn't stand a chance, especially not when they're being attacked by clansmen as well. It won't take very long for the action to start, though. Gondor is going to be forming up a few units over here. There's a very thick defensive line for them to try and push through, however. And what's going on over here? More Megil e Erin, potentially thinking about counter-attacking out. Some Carmel's shadow bows trying to can do some damage with their body piercing. It looks a lot more devastating than it is, to be fair, especially on dwarven units. Interestingly enough, these runic units are being well and truly thrown under the bus. They're starting to rout, so this elven infantry doing its job thus far, although now they're going to be stomped into the dirt. Sons of Yore, the offensive cavalry wakes up. This is exactly the sort of thing you want to take cavalry for in an offensive siege, to prevent the defenders from sallying out like that, especially knights. Knights are so difficult to get rid of quickly. These Dragon's Wrath guildsmen are being targeted by arrows. Individual buildings I think are still see-through on CAIR Andros, like this one here. Which is a bit unfortunate for Tundra's Fox. He needs to get these units out of here. Dragon's Wrath guildsmen are not the sort of unit you want to lose cheaply. Pelagia Marines are fighting something. A unit of dwarves which attack forward into the Ramas Ekor garrison. And again, needless to say, these lower quality units at the front probably going to take a decent amount of damage to the warriors of Khazad-dûm, but once again, I mean, they are surrounded. This was more of a foolhardy charge than anything else. I can see why he did it. I assume he was trying to stop the crossbows from firing. But quite frankly, if you don't have archers to try and counter the strong crossbowmen at this point, then defensive lines like this are exactly the sort of things which you want to bring crossbows to counteract. And unfortunately for the defenders, they're going to lose this unit of dwarven infantry. Eventually they're going to be worn down. Athelian Rangers moving forward. Again, another unit which you really want to target down with defensive archers. The body piercing on a full unit of Rangers like this could potentially be devastating to your front lines. But in this situation they will be shot point blank, so maybe a little bit of a misstep there by the Gondorian player. Probably a little bit worth keeping them in reserve for the late game. Late game Rangers can be devastating, of course. This front line over here still not really in any sort of danger. Now this could be interesting. The shotgun-like ammunition that the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen have is the sort of thing which can carve right through a defensive line like this. And they are immediately seen, of course, by the Morroquendi bows. The Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen trying to take shelter within the Riddermark axemen, but yeah, wise move there to pull them back. They're not the sort of unit you want to lose cheaply to archers. And it's difficult to get them into position unnoticed, but if you can, it can be a potential match winner. They're so devastating. Not quite to the same extent that the Witches are anymore, but there are also more of them. Maybe a little less temperamental to use than the Witches. These warriors of Khazad-dûm, meanwhile, just being overwhelmed by a sea of low-tier Gondorian and runic units. How many men have they lost in this defensive line? A decent amount. You can see a lot of Thandrimi Erin and Greenway guards are dead here. To be fair, they have spared the lives of the Morroquendi pikes so far to a large extent. But I do worry for the defence here. I mean, they do have reinforcements that they can bring out. We shall see. The Rangers did pull back, which is good to see. Trebuchet getting into position potentially. They'll probably save the Trebuchet to bring down the walls of the keep in the late game. Again, the attackers utilising their skirmish power, which again is the smart thing to do. I mean, the defenders, they've blocked off every avenue of attack with a strong defensive line, so the best thing to do is to try... Oh dear. Well, the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen were utilised, and the smouldering corpses of these elves is the evidence for that. This unit of Thandrimi Erin is significantly less powerful than it used to be. They have changed their defensive line a little bit now, though. This smaller street, and their potential... Well, that's a lot of fire arrows coming forth from the Gondor archers. Trying to get some shots along the attacking line here, but I'm not sure they're going to be too successful. The Morroquendi bows are hideously outnumbered by attacking archers, Athelian Rangers and Gondorian archers. They could deal enough damage to the Athelian Rangers to take away a lot of their effectiveness, which is possibly a good thing. It's hard to tell here whether the trade will be worth it. It will keep their defensive lines a little bit more healthy, but they will lose another unit of Morroquendi bows for it. You can see the layered nature of the defence here. And now, finally, this unit of dwarves which sallied out has been defeated. basically all of the attacking armies at this point are now within this southern section of the city. And the defensive line has moved, but it has moved essentially into range of the attacking archers, although I did see over here the Ents have moved forward, and they are going to support the Megil Erin and the warriors of Khazad-dûm in their assault. Now this could go either way. The Ents are going to get a huge amount of kills, I would imagine, on these basic Eastron units. But they will be brought down eventually. The Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen have got a ranged attack. The Carmel Shadow Guard have got a nice high base attack. I'm not sure how the Ents are for armour. I would imagine they've got high armour values. So the AP is probably going to be useful here. But the Ents are still going to be able to do huge amounts of damage to the Eastron units. Depriving the attackers of their numbers advantage is a very key part of this, and going on the offensive is not the worst idea in this sort of situation. The Ents will be able to carve through these units over here, and more of the attackers' resources will have to be funneled in here in, if not an offensive capacity, a defensive capacity, because you can't leave the Ents unchecked, they'll just do too much damage. But the flip side to this is this force over here has been really damaged by the attacking archers, and once again another unit of Master Blasters, well, the same unit actually of Master Blasters Megil Erin, which fled the Sons of Yule, has now come back over here, but again I think they're just going to be overwhelmed. More Rohirrim infantry has been committed forwards. And we are now, more or less anyway, at the halfway point of the battle, and yeah, it's a 10% gap now. I don't know, there's a lot. Oh, the Meduseld Guard were doing some nasty damage to this defensive line over here. It's very back and forth here. The defenders are trying to be aggressive, but unfortunately for them, the attackers do have the tools to deal with that. The cavalry is one of the main reasons why they can't be fully aggressive. Some nasty charges from the offensive knights would just be too much for them to bear, I think. You can see now the Mithlon Lancers are also in position. Combination of javelins and Lancer cavalry. How are the Ents doing? Yeah, the Ents obviously very, very powerful. They are starting to take casualties. One of them falls. And part of that can be attributed to the fact that the Carmel's Chosen and the Carmel's Shadow Guard are on the front line. Obviously substantially stronger than the Eastron units they were fighting just a moment ago, and this front line I think now is going to fall because the Elven Megil Erin are also starting to collapse, and the warriors of Khazad-dûm as well are not going to be able to hold this line all on their lonesome. Mithlon Lancers coming over here, and the Ents are pretty much all gone at this point. Their hit points were stripped from them. More and more reinforcements are being sent over here, sort of drips and drabs of these units which are already pretty battered. And at this point, yeah, I can see why the rest of the defences are starting to pull back, because they know that this area over here is going to fall, and they really don't have anything that they can use to reinforce this section, so the front lines are going to have to retreat. They need to retreat these front lines as well. Even if they leave behind individual units of pikes as a rearguard action against the cavalry chasing them, they need to save as much as they possibly can. That keep is still going to be a difficult thing for the attackers to deal with. The attackers have utilised a lot of their skirmish power at this point. And once again, it seems like the vast majority of these aggressive actions from the defenders have really come to naught. They've committed forward these individual units that they've tried to attack with, but they've committed them forward into death traps every time. Yeah, these units are mainly just Eastron units and lower tier Gondorian units, but there's so many of them that individual units are not going to do the trick. And you can see now that they are starting to retreat their units. They need to save as much as they can. Every little helps in a final stand, the likes of which is at that keep over there. So far the attacks have done well though. They've utilised their mass, they've sent forward their cannon fodder to absorb a lot of the damage, and when they've seen a threat they've committed forward strong units to deal with it. Tundra's Fox, particularly over on this side, he saw the threat of the Ents and he quickly committed forward some elite units to halt their advance. Rohan as well has done very well so far. The scary thing so far here is that the Gondorian and Linden player have got a lot of elite units left which they have not utilised yet, and you know, you can see how much of the attacking armies there still is left to go. One of the scariest things actually is how many axe throwers runes still have alive. I'm not quite sure why Proxima Centauri is not, and Thick Dick are actually not retreating these units over here. They need to retreat them now. I'm not sure why these Thrandrami Erin are essentially acting as a rearguard action. They're laying down their lives to buy time. They need to get these units out of here, otherwise this is going to be a horrendous waste, and this I think will be the final nail in the defender's coffin if they lose all of these units here in shot for no good reason. They have a good opportunity to retreat to the town centre, or at least to the area around the primary keep, and they are not taking it so far. Very strange indeed. Still some defensive skirmishers doing some work. Variag mercenaries trying to fire in, but again, there's still a lot in terms of lower tier units which the attackers can afford to commit forward and happily have them soak up the arrow fire. They're trying to kill the Eastron crossbows, but I can't help feel like the damage that they have inflicted has already been fairly telling. I'm actually surprised the attackers are not taking more advantage of the situation than they are at this point. I mean, they've managed to push through over on this side. It's possible that they can't actually go through these alleyways over here, which would explain why the defenders have not yet fallen back over here. But even so, it's still very risky for the defenders to have left these units so far forward without hope of reinforcements, because if that was the case and I was on the attacking team, I would suggest just overwhelming this defensive position. I wouldn't even... I would be tempted to save ranged ammunition for the keep at the end. Especially when it comes to javelins and axe throwers, the more of those you have in a final stand situation, the better it is. Look at that, these elves finally brought down. More and more of the city is falling under the sway of the invaders. So let's see what's going on over here. So, up here on the eastern side of the settlement, pretty comprehensive defence over here, made up primarily of, well, almost entirely of elves actually. Maeli Erin, Thandrami Erin, Morroquendi bows. At this point it would be devastating if it turned out Linden had some hidden units that they deployed on the ship, which they could have done if they reveal some a unit of Wardens of Elos Tyrian, or even a unit of Forlinton Scouts which can hide, of course. A rear charge from them at this point would be horrifying for the defenders, even with pikes there. The attackers still just sort of... It takes a little while for your armies to reorganise themselves after smashing your way through a defensive position. Ah, here we go. And yeah, this is what I was afraid of. You can see there's Westmark Marshals being committed to the front line as well. So they're even better than the Riddermark Axemen we've seen so far, and the Greenway Guards won't stand a chance against them. And the Morroquendi Pikes simply don't have the numbers, and the mass is going to end up being a real problem here. You can see Rohan, once again, using their weight. And this is from shock infantry as well. It's a unit that you don't normally see doing this thing, but the defenders have left themselves far too thin on these defensive lines, and now they're going to pay the price under the axes of the Rohirrim. And obviously the Pikes, their formation has now been circumvented, so, you know, let the slaughter begin. It's only a matter of time before that defensive line falls. What about this one? This one is not being attacked, and now they're retreating. They've left that very late. I can't imagine they're going to get away. And there's still these warriors of Khazad-dûm, which they need to get out of there. What's going on here? Routing dwarves. Been very impressed with Rohan so far in this battle. They've done very well for themselves. The synergy of all the attackers has been quite good, actually. The defenders so far have been the ones to make the mistakes, which is usually a sign of things to come. Even when you're outnumbered by just one army, mistakes can be fatal. But in this case they were outnumbered by 2, which probably means this fight is going to go in one direction only. We shall see though. The defenders and the rebels still have yet to commit the vast bulk of their very elite units, and they're powerful enough that they can make a substantial difference. And again, you can see that these Morroquendi pikes are going to be once again circumvented, but they have managed to save a couple of units of warriors of Khazad-dûm, so it wasn't a complete loss. But again, Morroquendi pikes being brought down by Eastron clansmen and Ramas Ekor garrison archers of all things is a real win for the attackers. Look at that, they crushed that defensive line, they overwhelmed it with sheer numbers. What are they going to do here? This is very odd. They might be retreating to the keep at this point. Oh, here. We can see here that the Mithlon Lancers charging in to try and disrupt their retreat, but that was a bit of a foolhardy move, that, because they charged right into Dunman pikemen, and now they're shaken, and they're pretty much all dead. There's only 2 of them left. They're routing. Yeah, that was... I suppose that just trying to buy time for these infantry units to come forward to block the retreat of the defenders is worth it in a sense, but they got absolutely slaughtered by those Dunman pikes. And yeah, the defenders are now pulling back to the keep, which is definitely the thing to do. So far, all of the layered defences that they've put on the outer side, except partially for the first one, have not really gone in their favour. So now, utilising the defensive walls and the gates, trying to narrow the engagements is really going to be their only hope at this point, and to utilise the skirmish power that they still have left, or that I hope they still have left. Otherwise, the attackers are just going to be able to roll forth and crush them. Now we have Sons of Yule, and now the pikes are out of position. So yeah, I don't think these dwarves are going to be getting back to the town centre in one piece. A bit of a tame charge by Knights standards. But if they... Well, there's another charge from more Knights coming in now. The Carmel's Dragon Knights and the Sons of Yule riding together is a scary thing. But it is going to be difficult actually for them to get much value after they've finished picking off what units have not yet retreated, because obviously the final stand is going to be very difficult to charge past any anti-cavalry defences that the defenders might set up. And presumably they still have Morroquendi pikes. The Ents are obviously going to be pretty damaging to cavalry if it gets a hold of them. And there should be skin changers still alive, which again should be suitably damaging. A bit of a slow charge so far. They get up to charge speed. That was a little bit more like it. Cleaving through that unit, taking a good chunk of them with the charge. Morroquendi bows trying to fire. Very depleted unit of them. Well, this is going to be horrifying for this unit of warriors of Khazad-dûm, because they are going to be charged by both units of attacking knights. Carmul and Theoden riding together. That's an odd combination. Carmel's Dragon Knights didn't get a particularly good charge, and neither did the Sons of Yule. Any additional damage the warriors of Khazad-dûm can do here would be a real boon. Yeah, I mean, we're going to be entering the final phases of the battle soon, and as soon as they finish picking off these retreating units, I think I will make another cut, because it's going to be a substantial amount of time before all of the attacking army is in position. They're a little bit stretched at the moment, trying to take advantage of the retreating defenders. And now I think we'll start to see the strength potentially of Gondor and Lindon. Thus far it's been primarily Rune and Rohan pushing through the outer defences, letting Lindon and Gondor save their elite units. Not that Gondor and Lindon have not been a part of proceedings so far, but they're really scary units, like the Fountain Guard, are now going to come into effect. The skin changes being used in an offensive capacity again. The Bears coming forward. Obviously the charge from the skin changes is going to be absolutely devastating, ripping through those Westmark Marshals. The unit I think that I could compare them to, I suppose, would be stuff like the Champions of the White Hand and the Melkor's Chosen. It would make a certain amount of sense for what they are. I can't imagine the Sons of Yore are going to be too happy about being in combat with the skin changers. And indeed, they are starting to fall. Again, the defenders are being aggressive. Well, there goes the skin changer general. Skin changers took, well, the Sons of Yore gave as good as they got in that situation, but there was the matter of range support coming from both sides, muddying the waters somewhat, the arrow towers and such. But once again, being aggressive looks as though it's not paying off for the defenders, which is unfortunate to see. I do like seeing aggressive play be rewarded, but there is a difference between aggressive and reckless, and the defenders have certainly been reckless. These Westmark Marshals, they're gonna meet the Thrandramy Erin, they're gonna prevent their retreat. And even if they do force path their retreat, the Westmark Marshals might be able to keep the gate open for their allies. So again, the Thrandramy Erin, they were going to try and be aggressive, and then they weren't decisive enough. Tried to retreat, and they got caught by the Rohan Axeman. Good spot that from Rohan. And now reinforcements are coming out. This is a good opportunity, this, for the attackers. If these Sons of Yore see this, they could wrap around and get some huge hammer and anvil damage. Will they see it, though? No, they're going to keep going after these warriors of Khazad-dûm, which, you know, these warriors are already doomed. That was a good charge, to be fair. That's going to pretty much finish them off. These Westmark Marshals will lose against this level of elven resistance, and, well, now the opportunity to use the cavalry is somewhat past because of the presence of these pikes. We saw what happened to Lyndon's cavalry in the face of lesser pikemen. Unrelenting charges. I mean, these dwarves have held up well to these night charges so far. A lot of units would have been long dead by now. You would imagine it's only a matter of time. I don't think I'm going to actually have to make a cut, because it looks as though the attackers are just going to follow through with these initial skirmishes around the wall and keep pushing on through. And now the defenders find themselves marooned on their hill, basically. Again, these Rohirrim soldiers, they've given their allies potential here. Carmel's Shadowbows trying to do what damage they can with their body-piercing projectiles. Well, the walls are starting to be peeled off, and it looks as though the defenders are just going to try and hold the hill in the interior, which is probably for the best. Splitting their defence has not worked for them so far. They simply haven't had the numbers or the resources or the quality in many cases to hold that line.
Only half our force remains.
Well, this is what I was hoping for a minute ago. I mean, this is a risky move at this point because of the presence of the pikes, but this could also... Oh, yeah. Those Morroquendi pikes doing a lot of damage to the Sons of Yore there. If that charge had come before the pikemen had been on hand, if they'd reacted immediately, could have been disastrous. And now, obviously, the Owl's trying to pull back. No, don't do it. Don't do it. Play it in. This is a more accurate result of pikes in front, archers behind. Only these aren't cheap orc pikes, these are finely crafted elven pikes. I feel as though the defenders are a little bit disjointed in terms of the communication with each other. You can tell from the fact that they've got these individual pockets of defence when they really should be organising as a whole up on this hill to have the best chance of survival. And even then it's, well... I don't know, I feel as though we're going to see a slow but sure offensive victory here. That is the sound of body-piercing projectiles from the Carmel's Shadowbows doing what damage they can. The elves need to get out of here at this point because the Fountain Guard, if they pin them in place, will do substantial damage. The pride and joy of the Gondorian army. There are the Baltroth tribesmen, so yeah, I think the hand-thrown projectiles are going to be one of the primary things that the attackers can leverage at this point. Lyndon still have some, Rune still have some, Rohan certainly still have some. And that's going to be rough. And you just get these units out of here. I mean, at this point, 4 Linden pikemen are coming in through the gap. They're exhausted, but I mean, at this point, the attack as well. I mean, this maybe is a little bit premature. Sending forward just a single unit of pikes. What are they going to be supported with? Harland infantry. Well, as long as the attackers start to attack on all fronts, looks as though Linden are going to be the ones to take up the mantle first of all. Nolder and Guard being committed forward with the siege tower. 4 Linden pikemen ready to reinforce. The first wave in through the breach. The Harland infantry's a good quality unit, but having said that, the defenders do have units of quality of their own down here. Morroquendi pikes, the Megali Erin are more or less a direct equivalent of the Harland infantry. Defences are relatively minimal, and based on numbers you would imagine the defenders are probably going to be able to hold that line, at least for the time being. Although I say that, defeat seems certain apparently for them. If the pikes manage to get themselves in order. The trebuchet at this point doesn't need to attack the walls. It could get into position and start flinging what ammunition it has left onto the hill to try and do damage to the final stand. We still have over 20k frames remaining. So it's not as if there is no fight left at all. Now we'll see what the true strength of the rebel faction is, I suppose. Got some black wolds. Let's go and have a look at what they actually have left. Morroquendi bows. A lot of Morroquendi bows. That's 4 units of Morroquendi bows actually, so it's going to be a lot of range power. There's some Thieves of Tharbad, black wolds. I don't think the sheer power of the Morroquendi bows is going to be enough to see them through. Might be enough to keep those axe throwers and javelins at range for a little while. But yeah, at this point they need to just fall back with all of the resources they possibly have to try and form up as strong a defensive line as they possibly can. Battle is not fully over yet, but it's almost over, I think, in terms of a competitive fight at any rate. I think at this point we're going to see the attackers just sort of manoeuvre into position, but there is still a minor fight happening down here. The Veriag mercenaries forming the rear guard, and they are going to be butchered by the first wave of the Linden assault. Well, now there is nowhere left for the defenders to retreat, so it's going to be an all-in kind of defence. CAIR ANDROS Classic this is. This was the one portion that WK didn't really change. CAIR ANDROS is of course it's a colossal map now. It used to be quite a small fortress in many ways, but now very, very large. Definitely an 8-player map, so I'm glad that this is a 5v3. Certainly needs to be of a similar size to get the most out of this map, otherwise there's simply too many open spaces. Linden left some of their siege towers over there. Now this is interesting. What are the trebuchets going to target? The wall? That's a bit of a waste. You can take as much time as you want going in through the one gap you've already opened up if you need to. The defenders will be glad of that, because trebuchet fire raining down on what's left of their defences would probably be the end of days. Now, let's hope it doesn't crash here in the final stages. Here come the Aowen Shield Maidens, an important unit. There's still a lot of attacking presence here in the city. So let's see, can the defenders reverse an outnumbered siege when they're more than 20 percentage points behind? That would be the biggest comeback in the history of comebacks that I've seen in this game. And they're going to base their hopes basically entirely on the Morroquendi bows here. If the archers are not able to get the kills necessary, they simply don't have the might, in a melee sense of the word, to hold the line for too much longer. The Ents and the Skin Changers are strong, but the Skin Changers will be subject to anti-cavalry damage, and the Ents, there simply isn't going to be enough of them to deal with the sheer amount of attackers. There's still a huge clump coming forward, and there's still Eastron units left alive.
The walls are no longer ours. The enemy siege tower is utterly destroyed.
Well, that, I think, is a result of the trebuchet getting a bit of friendly fire. which is pretty funny. Some crossed lines there as the Gondorian player started to attack the wall, and the Linden player cut across him. Now then, let us see how this goes. Don't know if the carcass of that siege tower is going to block the way. So, the Morroquendi bows, good choice of target this, going after the pikes, because they will obviously not stand up well under this sort of arrow fire at all. You do need to bear in mind the javelins and the axe throwers. It's going to be a very significant portion of what makes up this final portion. There's a huge clump, however, from Rune. There's a lot of cannon fodder that they can use. And back here they still have Harlingen infantry. Presumably they've still got some elites back here. One's Velociterian. Well, not so much maybe. In terms of sheer elite units, I think Gondor is going to make up the vast majority. In addition to the Noldorin Guard. It's not beyond the realms of possibilities the defenders could turn this around. In terms of quality, it's not an overwhelming force that the attackers have left, but they do still have individual units which can still do a decent amount of damage. And they still have a well-balanced army, which is perhaps the worrying thing from a defensive point of view. They're not in danger of running out of manpower anytime soon. Interesting defensive line. Again, it's more of a layered approach here, with the first line being made up of elves primarily, and then dwarves. Which in many ways is probably the wrong way round. You want the mass of the dwarves first and the skill of the elves second. How well they utilise their skirmishers is going to decide this, I think. And they're going to need to use the Morroquendi bows near perfectly. Or actually just straight up perfectly. This is interesting. Maybe a bit of a premature charge here from the Harlingen infantry, because they're not really going to make too much of a dent on their lonesome. Strong clansmen. Forland and pikemen once again. Actually, I think it's the Eowyn shield mains that are being targeted, which is a very wise decision. Those axe throwers could be the thing which breaks your final defensive line, because if this line, or if this pair of lines falls, it's going to be the end. Those Harlingen infantry not going to be sufficient to break down this defensive line. It is a tough line to break down, to be fair. They're going to need quality units. I think the Gondorians are going to have what it takes to really do some damage to these lines. Backed up by the axe throwers. The Eowyn shield mains have taken losses getting to the point where they're at, but they will still be able to get into a position where they can start to throw their payload. And they shouldn't rout either. The Eowyn shield mains do have an encouragement aura, I think. I do think they are a morale buffing unit, which, again, is going to stand them in good stead. It's going to keep these lower tier units like these strong clansmen fighting, hopefully, for longer. Hopefully from an attacking perspective. More Eowyn shield maidens moving forward. It's going to be a real test of how quickly the Morroquendi bows can dish out the damage, and on that unit they've done it very well. The Thieves of Tharbad are going to move forward. Now once again, the defenders need to be prepared to commit everything to a single line fight here. Otherwise they could be in danger of once again seeing individual defences they've set up wither under sheer weight of numbers. Those Thieves of Tharbad could be an important unit. They're pretty highly skillful. They count as an assassin unit, but they do not have a ranged attack. Here comes the Runic Horde. Honestly, if the defenders can deal with these guys efficiently, that would certainly make a big difference to the percentage gap. Might start to make this fight look a little bit less unwinnable. So far, this engagement has gone well. The Ramas Ekor garrison archers, perhaps predictably, not really doing all that much in terms of damage and melee, so they have routed and broken. But more and more runic cannon fodder. Sheer amount of lower tier units which Rune brought to this fight. A trash army, but they've performed a very vital role here. the numbers advantage was extreme for the attackers, and they've made it count so far. Carmel's chosen, that's exactly the sort of unit they're going to need on the front line. It's a real quality unit, which the defenders honestly can't match short of something like their Ents. Which has been a bit of a problem. The Rebels roster is limited in terms of the units you can build an army out of. Only 2 shield mains remaining. There's still individual units though. There's still the Hornburg sentries. I'd completely forgotten about them. They'll be difficult to get rid of. It's still just a matter of numbers, I think. I just don't think... Oh, and that's interesting. The Wardens of Elos Tyrion getting up on the walls. Do they still have ammo though? I mean, they're being focused down immediately. The danger that they represent, I suppose, cannot be ignored. But again, it's going to be a matter of how wisely these Morroquendi bows are used, which really is the defender's last remaining hope. This part of the line is a little bit thinner. Might need to start thinking about sending forward a unit of warriors of Khazad-dûm to reinforce that line. Ensure that these Eastrons can't overwhelm, which has been one of the primary problems the defenders have fallen prey to so far. More Morroquendi bows. What are they firing at from over here? Trying to deal with the Carmel's shadow bows? Well, that's going to be the end of them. Honestly, a unit of 11 shadow bows is not really worthwhile to waste all that ammunition on. At this point, the Morroquendi bows are the cornerstone of your defence. You can't afford to chase tiny units like that around the field. Guards of Osgiliath. So far, the defensive lines have held up well. But they have not really gone up against a really strong unit so far. Carmel's chosen a loitering with intent. There's a lot of very damaged units which they could potentially send in. Ooh, the Wardens of Elos Tyrion are now up on the walls. They do still have some ammunition remaining. This could be the sort... Well, they're spinning in place. That's very strange. They might move down off the wall. Now there's flickering on the wall. Clearly it's satanic. Rohan are going to send forward some Axemen. Some Riddermark Axemen. A lot of Rohan's units are pretty damaged at this point, but then they have been taking the initiative since the early game. I think the real problem for the defender is going to come when Gondor and Linden decide to commit stuff like the Wardens of the White Tower, the Nimlothian Honor Guard, and the Noldorin Guard. I don't think the defenders are going to have what it takes to hold them off for too long. The Ents will be able to do damage, but they won't be able to bring down all of them. More units being committed forward. Unupgraded Gondor infantry. Just sending forward their lower tiers first. More trash being sent forward. More Eastron warriors. Harlanden infantry now moving forward as well. A real grind here right at the end. The defenders only have one road that they can now defend, and it seems to be suiting them substantially better than the early defences did, where they had to split their attention between multiple roads. It's possible to make such a thing work, but you need to be prepared to commit a lot to areas where the attackers try and push through with sheer weight of numbers, and I don't think the defenders did that to the extent they needed to. Let's have a look at the percentages now though. It has closed a little bit. It's still not under 10%, but it is at least under 20% now. This is going to be a bit of a litmus test for this front line now. Now that some more units have been committed forward, units with a little bit more bite to them. Harlanden infantry. Gondor infantry as well is obviously superior to Eastron clansmen. More arrows flying. Focusing down the Sons of Yore. Honestly, the Sons of Yore, not a priority target anymore. You can simply let your pikes deal with them. The Sons of Yore and the Carmel's Dragon Knights, not really all that dangerous anymore. Your front line, however, is starting to feel the strain. It's starting to creak a little bit. These warriors of Khazad-dûm giving it their all, but eventually you'd have to imagine they're probably going to be overwhelmed by a combination of Rohan and Gondor infantry. So it might be time to push forward the secondary line, unless you want the enemy to push a little bit further forward, exhaust themselves a little bit more, and give your archers a slightly better shot. Still have some units in reserve, but it's not impossible the defenders can win this. I don't want to count them out just yet, but it is still unlikely. Athelian Rangers. I'm not sure how useful the skin changers are going to be in this situation because they're bottled up. As with most cavalry in a final stand situation, it's going to be difficult to push through the defensive lines. The best bet is going to be if the line does break, it charges in immediately to deal some nice charge damage. Hopefully there isn't any pikes on hand to deal with them at the time. I think most of Lyndon's pikes are actually dead, so that might come to pass. There's just more lower tier units coming in though. Not the Harland infantry, but more bandits. What's going on here? Thieves of Tharbad thinking about committing themselves to the fight. Yeah, these warriors of Khazad-dûm at this point being overwhelmed. So this first defensive line is going to fall, and a little bit too soon in my opinion. They still haven't had to deal with the likes of... well, the Thieves of Tharbad are committing themselves forward to try and hold them back for a little longer. But they are immediately finding themselves the attentions of... well, the Athelian Rangers are almost dead actually. More and more numbers pouring forward, however. Harland infantry, a couple of units of bandits. The bandits might rout, but the Harland infantry probably won't. And at this point, I think the numbers of the attackers is going to be sufficient to break through. And that will lead us nicely, at the time it happens, presumably into the final 10,000 frames. Westmark infantry moving forward. So this is the thing, they've been able to conserve their more powerful units. They still have lower tier Eastrons that they can commit forward, as well as stuff like the Westmark infantry and Gondor spearmen. In the end, the Gondorian and Lyndon elites might not need to do anything until the defenders are already almost broken. The Thieves of Tharbad did commit themselves forward, and they're having a good time of it so far. Obviously, lower skilled axemen are not going to be a good fit for fighting assassins. Neither is standard line infantry, and neither are bandits, to be fair. What might undo them is any sort of arrow fire they take, and the fact that there aren't really that many of them. I am very confused as to why the defenders keep going for this layered defence approach. Because they keep committing individual... and now there's Thieves of Tharbad charging into the mess like this. That's the last thing you want to happen. Yeah, and individual mistakes like that are why I think the defenders are going to lose. Because this wasn't an impossible scenario for the defenders to win. I think the fact that they have slightly come back into it here towards the end, although they are starting to fall away again now, is proof that they could deal damage, but I think ultimately missteps along the way, miscommunication, and ultimately a relatively poorly constructed defence in terms of their layers is what's ultimately going to cost them here. Like, you can't afford to layer your defence when there's this many men opposing you, because they can simply pick one road to focus on, smash it to bits, and then the rest of your lines have to fall back, and all the while that's happening you're going to have individual units picked off. So yeah, I feel as though mistakes here, a little bit, better communication, less reckless play, and the defenders would have stood much better of a chance. And again, this sort of indecisiveness here. These Morroquendi bows were committed forward again. It's Master Blaster. He committed them forward, and now he's pulling them back out because he realises it's hopeless, but they took losses and damage just from being in that fight, when it was obvious they were never really going to do much of anything there. Gondorian spearmen, Carmel's Chosen have taken range damage, but they can stand up well to archer fire. Eastron crossbowmen now getting into position, but again they're going to be focused down. So we are now getting into the final 10,000 frames, unfortunately, and it is going to be as the outer defensive line breaks of the elves, it's now going to be up to the dwarven phalanx to try and hold them off for as long as possible. I mean, at this point, it's a case of you probably just need to commit everything all at once. Honestly, an attack from the defenders here, downhill into all of these units, could cause a substantial amount of damage with all of the attacking elites still on the outside of the wall. It'd be worth a shot at this point. You've got very little to lose. At this point in time, playing conservatively, it's a little bit late to be conservative. You're already behind by a substantial amount. Still not able to reel it back to within the 10% mark, and at this point I imagine the Morroquendi bows are running on fumes. They've still got ammo. They've actually got a lot of units that still have ammo, but the question now is whether or not they will get to use that ammunition. The attackers have been very wise not to reveal their elite units thus far, and instead just try and slowly but surely pick their way through with pure, using their trash units and mid-tier units to wear them down. Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen are here as well. They would have been a prime target for being shot. And they're very highly skillful. Megil the Erin are certainly not going to be sufficient to deal with them. And now, again, this goes to show again, a bit of a poorly constructed defence. The Westmark infantry able to worm their way through this defence. I would imagine this is the point where the Ents are going to rush forward, and maybe the Blackwolds and the Skin Changers. So these Westmark infantry, despite the fact they did find a gap, they are going to pay for it very dearly. That was a brutal charge from the Skin Changers. Their charge value must be extremely high, because that wasn't even a particularly clean charge, and they still carved right through that unit. And the Ents are now here. Sat down there, Sons of Yore, more Eastron clansmen, more Highland infantry. It's a never-ending assault here on the town centre. Proxima Centauri's Morroquendi bows as well as Master Blasters. Some of them are out of ammunition now, so they are being committed to the front line. Honestly, with how some of the reinforcing has worked and how some of the units have held their ground, it's almost like one of the players is AFK, but that isn't the case because I've seen all of the defensive units play, well, all of the defending players still moving their units. It's a very strange thing. More Westmark infantry. Don't want to get too close into this fight, otherwise it might crash, and that would be devastating at this point in proceedings. A 66,000 frame battle is one of the longest I've ever shown. One of the longest I was ever sent in was in excess of 90,000 frames, which I'm not sure how long that must have taken in real time. That's like a huge portion of the day. That was on Mount Gundabad, I believe, which is a large battle, but not one that I would expect to take 90k frames on. Well, they are going to need another wave, the attackers, to break the spirit of the defenders here. I feel as though it is only a matter of time. The Skin Changers are coming downhill. Interesting position to do it. There are Gondor Spearmen here, and they do have the... well, the bandits are running for the hills as a result of seeing large bearded men riding grizzly bears. I can't blame them, I suppose. Still those elites, though. Those elites. What's the percentage looking like now? It is now actually 10%. I'd be amazed if the defenders were to come back and win this. It would speak for the quality of the highest tier neutral units if they did, considering that the attackers haven't really done much wrong so far, and the defenders, in my opinion, have. And yet they could. Could it happen? I think there must have been... It would be interesting to see what the rules were for picking armies, because Rune's armies were definitely lighter on quality. They both had a huge amount of Eastron units. Another wave is now coming forward. I still think that the attrition overall is going to be too much. And now we have Meduzel's Guard. Will the Morroquendi bows spot them? I don't think so. The Meduzel's Guard were also flinging their javelins earlier on in the battle, so it's entirely possible they're just going to be used as melee infantry. High quality melee infantry at that. And the Skin Changer's doing a large amount of damage here. utilised very effectively here. This is all going to be a moot point if the front line breaks, of course. The Duzal Guard don't have any ammunition left, I don't think, and indeed they are now finding themselves the centre of the Morroquendi Bow's attention. They do have shields though, and they are multiple HP, so they should withstand this sort of battering better than most, but even so. These skin changes going into the soft, gooey centre. Look at that, look at their mass. They just carved through that offensive line there. They do need to be careful, because of course they will take damage doing this sort of thing. But if they can cause a lot of these forces to break, it's not impossible that this battle could turn around. I mean, Morroquendi bows are not the easiest thing to deal with in melee. There's still a unit of Blackwolds. There's still those Ents. Could we see the greatest comeback of all time? The Blackwolds are coming downhill. Their AP could be useful in this situation. Their damage will certainly do a lot of good against these lower tier runic units. I'm not sure whether they cause fear like the Uruk-hai Berserkers. They might. If they do, then the attritional damage the attackers are taking here could come back to bite them. More Harlanded infantry being pushed forward, some regrouped bandits are just going to be sent forward as well. The Carmel's chosen just in behind here, and their encouragement aura is going to be up and active, which at this point is proving to be a real godsend for the attackers. Otherwise I imagine the close proximity of the fear-causing units from the defenders would be a real problem for them. What have the attackers actually got left? Wardens of Alos Tyrian in the back, Mithlon Marines, Wardens of the White Tower, that's going to be a difficult nut to crack, as well as the Nimlothian Honour Guard, Noldorin Guard, more Eowyn Shield Maidens, Baltroth Tribesmen. A lot of these are skirmisher units though. Hornburg Sentries being pushed forward. The Ents are going to come downhill. This is a relatively weak section of the attacking line actually. This could be enough to send these Eastron Warriors and Westmark Infantry routing. Of course, committing the Ents now means they won't be available later, but this might be actually a good move to make the Ents do as much damage as they possibly can now. Because I imagine units like the Nimlothian Honour Guard would do substantial damage to the Ents pretty quickly. And the skin changes, actually, come to think of it. This part of the defensive line is now not really looking too healthy. The Nimlothian Honour Guard could be just the thing here to do substantial damage. Mithlon Pikemen is also going to be a good move because it would prevent the skin changers from charging with reckless abandon into the attacking lines, as they have been doing. Yeah, there's a lot of routing going on. The Ents doing a really good job. Gondor Archers, Noldorin Guard. The Mithlon Pikemen should be the focus of the Archers' attention at this point. Skin changers, still trying to do as much damage as they possibly can. I think the defenders have still left it too late. I can't imagine there's going to be a way back into this. I mean, they've brought it back to within 6%, which is incredibly impressive. The Ents are now pulling back as well. Yeah, that attack has actually been almost completely thrown off. This Harlanded infantry has pushed forward, but they're going to be right into the... they're just going to charge right into overwhelming odds anyway. Megali Erin forming up another line. There's these Blackwolds. The Sentries of Khazad-dûm still forming up a very efficient centre to this defensive line. We're within the final 4,000 frames at this point, so this is going to be it. I think, based on the amount of time left, the defenders' line will eventually break, because I can't imagine with 4,000 frames left, the defenders would be able to kill all of what the attackers have remaining. Just through powers of deduction alone, especially seeing as there is a gap here, which, if they wanted to, the attackers could take advantage of. I'm pretty sure they still have their Dragon Knights squirreled away somewhere. Indeed they do. Here come the skin changers. This unit of Harland infantry is actually largely cut off at this point. There's Noldorin Guard though. Defeat seems certain. Taking damage, armour piercing damage. one of the only Linden unit against which the Black Wolds are pretty strong. Sons of Yore, depleted but charging forward. The pikes are just a little bit too far behind the infantry here. They need to be pushed forward so that the attacking cavalry is not allowed to be effective. Well, this could be what finally breaks the spirit of the defenders, the javelins, and in particular the Dragon's Wrath crossbows. They're in a grisly position. There's not really much the defenders can do about this either. They're going to get at least one volley off, even if the Morroquendi bows pour all of their ammunition into them. And they are focusing down the Balchoth tribesmen. Ugh. That's the very centre of the defence. The Black Wolds taking nasty damage. The Noldering Guard pushing further in. Dragon Knights coming forward. The Ents are coming in. I imagine the Ents suffer from... well, the skin changes actually do push through the attacking lines. This is going to be it. The powerful skirmishes of the attackers have been committed forward at this point. And I imagine this is going to be where the attackers finally make it too difficult for the defenders to come back. Indeed, the percentages have remained static. Largely static anyway. It was a brave effort from the defenders. I feel as though if they had just managed their resources a little bit more wisely earlier on, they could have pulled this one out. The Ents are now coming forward trying to deal with these skirmishes. Here come the elites now. This should be the final nail in the coffin. There's Noldering Guard, Hornberg sentries, Wardens of the White Tower. What's that over there? More Shadow Guard. Yeah, this should be it. There's also those Wardens of Elos Tyrian, which presumably have still got ammunition. These Dragon Knights are in the back line as well, preventing the Morroquendi bows from firing. Ooh. Those Dragon's Wrath crossbows inflicting deep wounds on the defensive line there. This has been closer than I thought it was going to be, though. I did fear that the attackers would have a 30 percentage point lead by the end, but it hasn't turned out to be so. Look at that. Just ripping, tearing great holes, canals through the defence. And this is going to be the end, I think. Final wave is coming forward, the strongest wave of all. There goes another defending general. And the Carmel's Dragon Knights also in behind the backline, so yeah, the attackers are going to win. Close though. Very close. Closer than most 3 versus 5 siege battles are. And that does speak quite a lot, I think, for the effectiveness of some of those units. You could see what the skin changes and the Ents were capable of when you use them wisely. They're not invincible, and I think early on you saw the Ents in the city get butchered pretty quickly. And you do need to be careful with them, but if you use them wisely, they can deal insane amounts of damage. Again, I think the way to look at the Ents is just slightly stronger versions of the strongest trolls. Don't quote me on that, but I think that they are stronger than the Olag High. With all of the rebalancing that's happened, though, who knows? I don't really look at the Ent stats. Haven't looked at them for a while. They aren't really they're not a unit you see all that often. The Rebels are not really a faction you see utilised outside of special battles like this. Dragon's Wrath crossbows, victory seems certain. Individual Black Wolds. And at this point, the attackers are just going to wash over the defenders. The sentries of Khazad-dûm, which held the line resolutely for a long time. Finally, the Fountain Guard and the Mithalon pikemen proved too much for them. And finally, the Morroquendi bows are going to be the last ones to fall. These units might be awoken from their perpetually routing stupor, but very depleted pikemen at this point are not what is called for. A whole nother army to reinforce them is what is called for. This is going to be the end. I think we will go into ×2 speed. It did start to run smoother towards the end. Yeah, those Dunman pikemen did get sort of knocked back into effectiveness. These Morroquendi bows, I mean, those grisly. Eowyn Shieldmanes, as the Fountain Guard are for Gondor, the Eowyn shield maidens are for Rohan. They are such an integral part of Rohan's army. Unless you're going for some sort of crazy anti-cavalry nonsense, the Eowyn shield maidens are a really important part of your army. Not only for the damage they can deal, but also for the encouragement that they give to Rohan's lower tier units, which you'll probably be utilising. Rohan's infantry is not quite up to the same standards as some of the other kingdoms of men. It's functional, and the armour piercing damage that they can dish out with their axemen, as we saw in this battle, can be very, very effective indeed. Still going, but nonetheless, having a look at the attackers, Tundra's Fox getting the most kills. I think that's because he was the most aggressive from the off, and he had the opportunity to attack most of the lower tier, shall we say, of the defenders. But actually, on both teams, all of the players getting relatively even amounts of kills. Tundra's Fox is really the closest thing to an outlier. Everyone else was within basically 100 kills of one another, which is pretty good. It shows that everyone basically performed well, I think. I think the defenders, if they made slightly less in terms of mistakes, they would have won this battle. But as it is, of course, you know, this went to the attackers, which in a 3 versus 5, the 5 is almost always going to have a bit of an advantage there. Master Blaster's army, obviously individual units getting nice kills. Morroquendi bows in the last stand, obviously going to get a lot of kills considering the position they were in. But considering the ground they had to make up, they needed to get even more than they did. The Ents getting a nice amount of kills. Elsewhere, however, you can see some of the basic units, some of them did okay, but some of them were overwhelmed. And the ones that were overwhelmed, obviously getting less kills. Warriors of Khazad-dûm, Megal Yaren, Thandram Yaren, they're all very good units, which will defeat equivalent units, but they're not really elites. And against units like Carmel, Shadow Guard and the like, they were always going to struggle a little bit when the attackers really flexed their muscles to smash through the layered defence they had in the city, which is ultimately where the attackers won this, I think. But yeah, very even, very good. There wasn't really anything in terms of major mistakes. Everyone can hold their head high in this battle. I think the defenders as a whole could have played it slightly better, as I said. They've got nothing to be ashamed of. There's no shame in losing a battle in which you're outnumbered by 2 armies. So yeah, this is the longest battle I've done in quite some time, so I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you will join me for whatever is next, which I'm not sure what will be next. There's a bit of flux at the moment, but I'll get something done. So yeah, I hope you'll join me for whatever it is.